You know that person who always has a reason not to go out? Friends meeting up? I really can't today. Big concert? I have to take care of my cat. And after a while, you start thinking they're just making excuses. But what if they're not? What if being alone isn't something they fall back on, but something they actually choose? Because the people who actually enjoy being alone aren't as simple as they look. There's something different about the way they think. And once you start noticing it, you can't ignore it anymore. So what exactly are they noticing that most people don't? It usually starts with something subtle. The first thing they notice is how much people change around other people, not in obvious ways, but in small shifts that are hard to ignore once you see them. Like someone who acts completely normal until a boss walks in, and suddenly their tone softens. They agree more quickly. They laugh a little harder than they need to. And for a moment, it doesn't even feel like the same person anymore. People who enjoy being alone pick up on this instantly. Not just what people say, but how easily they reshape themselves, depending on who's around. And after a while, noticing that over and over again becomes exhausting, which is part of why being alone feels so much easier. The second thing they notice is how rarely people are actually listening, not pretending to listen, but really paying attention. Like when someone is already preparing their answer while the other person is still talking, or when a conversation feels fast, but somehow shallow at the same time. People who enjoy being alone pick up on this quickly, that most conversations aren't really about understanding. They're about waiting for your turn to speak. And after a while, being around that kind of interaction starts to feel empty. But when they're alone, something shifts. Their thoughts don't have to compete. Nothing needs to be said too quickly. And for once, things actually feel clear. And once you experience that kind of clarity, you start noticing something even deeper. The third thing they notice is how often people say things they don't actually mean. Not big lies, just small ones that everyone seems to accept, like saying, "We should definitely meet again," when both people know it won't happen. Or, "I'm fine," when something is clearly off, or agreeing with something just to avoid making things uncomfortable. People who enjoy being alone pick up on this constantly. That gap between what's said and what's actually real. And after a while, being around that kind of communication starts to feel draining because nothing feels fully honest. And that's when being alone starts to feel different. Not quieter, but more real. And once you start noticing that, there's something else you can't ignore. The fourth thing they notice is how uncomfortable people get with even a few seconds of silence. Not the kind of silence that's awkward, just normal pauses. Like when a conversation naturally slows down and someone immediately fills the space, talking about anything, just to avoid that quiet moment. People who enjoy being alone notice this instantly. That silence, for most people, isn't neutral. It's something they need to escape. And after a while, being around constant noise like that starts to feel overwhelming. Because for them, silence isn't empty. It's where everything actually settles. And once you see that, there's something even deeper going on. And the last thing they notice is how different they feel after being around people compared to when they're alone. Not just physically, but mentally. Like something shifts after spending time with others. Their thoughts feel louder, less clear, slightly scattered. But the moment they're alone again, everything starts to settle. Their mind slows down. Things make sense again. And that contrast, that difference between being around people and being alone, becomes impossible to ignore. And that's when they realize they don't avoid people because they dislike them. They just understand what their mind needs to feel like itself again. Because when there's no pressure to respond, no need to adjust, no constant noise to process, the thoughts finally slow down. Things stop competing for attention. And everything feels clearer, not perfect, just real. And if you relate to this, you're probably not as distant as people think. You just experience the world a little differently,